We're trying something a little different today. We're shooting this live from out at my truck yard. I won't be able to respond to you immediately with your comments because I haven't figured out how to quite do that yet, but I'll get to that when I get back to my computer. But in the meantime, this is an experiment, bear with us, but please feel free to comment, and I'll tell you what's prompting this live video. I was out here working on my truck and thinking away, and I found out in the news this morning that Saskatchewan has dropped its MELT truck driver training program. Now let me explain to you exactly what that is and how it came about in the first place. In 2018, in Humbolt, Saskatchewan, there was the worst truck accident ever seen in North America, and it killed 16 people, crippled 13, and what happened was a semi, a 140,000-pound semi, ran a stop sign at highway speed and collided with a Greyhound bus full of hockey players. Now, everybody in Canada knows this story, but some of you down in the States may not be familiar with it, so I'm just reiterating that. The truck was driven by an immigrant, a guy that had kind of a fake license out of Alberta, and he'd only had it for a couple weeks. He had zero experience, he had zero training. This was not the first accident by an immigrant truck driver in Canada. It's one of many, but this was the most horrific one. So the province of Saskatchewan decided, oh, we've got to do something, because they knew there were problems. All of Canada knows there have been problems with our immigrant drivers. So they brought in what they called the MELT program, and it was to be a driver training program for new drivers, for immigrant drivers, something that everybody would have to take so they were all familiar and had enough qualifications to at least start driving a truck in Canada. Saskatchewan, it took them 3 years after this accident to implement this MELT program. So God knows why it took them 3 years. And now here this morning on the news, I saw that Saskatchewan has now canceled the MELT program there because they found that it's taking too long for the immigrant drivers to complete the driving course. And it's 121 and a half hours, but it's taking them too much time. They don't have the time to do the course. So Saskatchewan has just thrown caution to the winds and said, okay, just anybody that comes into Canada, you can drive a truck. And it's a giant step backward, another giant step backward for truck safety. And the industry loves to talk about truck safety, and they love to preach it. They just don't practice it at all. And it's evident. Look at the Denver crash in 2019 when this fella came down the hill, burned out his brakes, killed 4 people, crippled dozens more. And it was because the guy didn't speak English. He didn't understand the grade signs going down the side of the mountain. He didn't understand the runaway ramp signs when he was going down the mountain out of control. And he didn't even know how to use a runaway ramp when he went past it with no brakes. And instead, his solution for stopping was piling into the traffic that was stopped at the bottom of the mountain and killing a bunch of people. That guy shouldn't have been on the road in the first place in the States or in Canada because he didn't speak any English. He didn't have a command of the language. Now, in Canada, that's no longer a law, but it is still a law in the States. And now, in the last more and more and more for new truck drivers. Their latest move right now is what they want is for a new driver, before he even gets his license, to be able to go on the road and drive the truck by himself. No driver trainer required. Just learn as you go and ricochet off the traffic. That's what they're asking for now. But before that, there was no minimum requirement for the driver trainer. So they would take guys with 3 months experience, put him and a couple of students in some cases into the cab, make him the driver trainer, and none of them had a clue on how to drive a truck well. And they just turned them loose into the driving public. Look at this testing, and I use the word testing because that's what it is, of autonomous trucks on public roads. Does anyone think that's a good idea? Does anyone think that's safe? Most of the driving public aren't aware of that. But I sure as hell wouldn't want my family in a car next to a truck with no driver at all at the wheel and praying the technology works. We've already seen footage on YouTube that sometimes that stuff fails and the truck crashes. Why are we allowing testing on our roads of this experimental equipment? It's not us that's allowing it, it's our governments. The governments, we elect them to keep us safe, and they're just ignoring safety altogether because they've been bought by the big buck, by the big companies that say, oh, you know, let us test these trucks and we'll donate $5 million to your political campaign. There's no sense of safety about it. Look at the truck driver training standards. They've gone down over the years. The ATA petitioned so that there would be no minimum amount of hours behind the wheel training required for new truck drivers. That's how everybody learns. You don't learn in a classroom sitting behind a desk how to drive a truck. You learn by driving the truck with someone competent sitting beside you. And frankly, that training should go on for months, not a week. But and you know, truck drivers all know this stuff. But nobody listens to the truck drivers because we're considered second-class citizens. We're not considered as smart as the bureaucrats that run the FMCSA. That don't know the front from the back of a truck, yet they're put in charge of them. It's ridiculous. Or the Secretary of Transportation has zero experience as well. So it's a farce. So while they like to preach safety, there's no practical application of it at all. Look at the ELDs. That was supposed to be a safety mechanism brought in, but instead the carriers turned it into an alarm clock. So if you ran out of hours in the middle of the afternoon, you were getting up at 2 in the morning to go out and face the weather conditions no matter what they were. Whether you felt safe to go, whether you felt rested or not, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Production was the important thing. Revenue was the important thing. Money was the important thing. Safety had nothing to do with it in their eyes. Look at the four-wheelers. Look at the four-wheelers we know that cause between 70 to 90% of the accidents on our roads. Has anything been done by the government to improve the level of training that the four-wheeler drivers get? Nada. Zero. Everybody knows they're the major cause of the accidents, but no political figure wants to stick his foot in that hot bath and go, well, I can afford to lose voters by pointing out the obvious, that some of them don't drive very well. No one's going to go there. So it's just allowed to continue. And it makes me so mad as a professional driver to see all these big companies and the government preaching safety, 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 and they don't practice it. And some of it is so obvious. It's so obvious you'd have to be stupid not to recognize it, but the governments and the big trucking companies just kind of turn their eyes the other way and pretend it's not going on. It's incredible to me, and it's embarrassing. It's lowering the quality and the caliber of the truck drivers on our roads today, because any clown now can get in an 18-wheeler that weighs up to 80,000 pounds gross or more in some cases, and just drive the truck and hope it all works out. Hope he understands that he's got to go down the hill slowly. Hope he understands that the braking distance is so much more. Hoping he understands that he's got to read bridge clearance signs so he knows which ones he can get under and which ones he can't. There's been a rash of bridge strikes here in the last couple of years. And everyone's going, oh, geez, you know. Like half of those guys can't even read English, so they don't know what the sign says. It's an incredible situation, but it galls me to know that these things could be fixed so easily, so effortlessly. Yes, it would cost some money, and that's the problem. It would cost somebody somewhere money, but nobody wants to commit to that. They all want to make as much money as they can and just let the lives scatter where they may, and that's the sad truth of it. They just hope the statistics are low enough that they're considered acceptable, and they get away with it, and it just galls my butt.
Somebody mentioned about mirrorless trucks, if you want to comment on mirrorless trucks.
There's something else that's coming up the pike, and I see these new Super 2 trucks coming out. Kenworth just made a beautiful one. But a couple of things worry me about it, safety-wise, because they rely on little cameras to act as the mirrors, and because they like these cameras because there's less drag, so the truck gets more fuel efficiency. So we all know that everything breaks, everything electronic breaks. It's the nature of the beast. You can't avoid it. So sooner or later, these trucks are going to have failures on these little cameras they use for mirrors, and then the truck is going to be dead stopped in the road because you cannot move, because you will not be able to see what's beside you on either side if these cameras go out. It's just not safe even to pull onto the shoulder. You won't be able to limp it to a truck stop and buy a replacement mirror like you could with the regular style, the old style trucks. It's just, like, I understand the goal, but the concept is so far from the working reality. Why introduce it into the industry before they've got all the bugs out of it? But no, everybody's in a hurry to make more money. The guy that holds the patent to the cameras that substitute for the mirrors, they're in a big rush to make more money. They've got to, pay their shareholders back or whatever it is. It's money, 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 money. Safety is a joke. Safety is a joke in the trucking industry anymore, and it shouldn't be. We rely so heavily on this supply chain, and we've learned that through the pandemic. The country can't survive without its supply chain. So if it is that important, and we know now that it is, why would you risk making all these stupid moves and introducing them to how your supply chain runs? It's mind-boggling.
and also they're risking the truck drivers' lives.
It's not just the truck drivers' lives, although there is that. They're risking the lives of the driving public, but they're risking the truck drivers' lives too. And are truck drivers' lives so worthless that they don't even consider that in the equation anymore? Because that's kind of what it looks like. They kind of think, well, this guy's cheap labor. If he wrecks, we can replace him. Man, I don't like that attitude at all.
One guy said truckers are the fall guys.
Truckers are the fall guys. Crap always rolls downhill. We as truck drivers know that. And whenever something goes wrong, at the end of the day, it's the truck driver's fault, ultimately. Even though he may have taken steps because he's seen the problem coming, tried to avoid it, made his superiors aware of it, they'll all deny it. At the end of the day, the truck driver is the guy that gets the blame. And it's crap. It's crap is what it is. So I know we're considered second-class citizens and not worth listening to. But who else should you be listening to? Who knows more about trucks and trucking than truck drivers? Not one bureaucrat in Washington knows more about it than the average truck driver. But they just choose to turn a blind ear, I guess, and figure, it'll all work out as long as we're still making money.
Deaf ear.
Yeah, blind ears, deaf ears. Yeah, I guess it would be deaf ears, wouldn't it? But I'm so ticked off at this whole lack of safety concept. Well, safety is just an illusion, the one driver told us. And he's right. It's the illusion of safety is what they're all after.
A dangerous job. The average person just has no idea.
And that is true. Again, this year it was ranked as the top.
Truck driving.
The number one. Truck driving was the number one most dangerous job in America for the second or third year in a row. And, they don't want to talk about that, and they don't want to do anything to fix it or alleviate the problem. They're just crossing their fingers and hoping we can limp along until the autonomous trucks come along, and they'll spend even less on driver wages. But if they truly were concerned with highway safety, they'd up the pay of the truck drivers, because cheap pay attracts lousy drivers. If you pay well, the pros will come back and work again. And that's what you should be shooting for, not cheapest labor cost, but that's the name of the game these days. It's just their thinking is so backwards, and it drives me nuts.
Just a couple of hellos to Trucker Hershey and Poet.
Trucker Hershey, amen.
And Poet.
And Poet, glad you could join us. I hope you're enjoying our little experiment, my rant here. I get so ticked off when they do these stupid things. And then you know if it doesn't work out, they'll blame the truck driver.
Do you want to address the guy getting shipped back to India from the Saskatchewan accident?
It's interesting. This whole rant started about the Humboldt driver. So he was sentenced to 8 years in deportation, 8 years in the can in deportation. He did 4 years. Half of that was house arrest, and now they've decided to deport the truck driver, which was right. That was the decision of the court. And that opinion was voiced by many of the families of those hockey players that died. Because who wants to see that guy around when he's not even a Canadian citizen? Deport him. But this guy now is fighting deportation hand over fist because he doesn't want to go back. He knows Canada's a better country than India, and he doesn't want to go back. But, the law is the law. The judgment was the judgment. He doesn't care. He wants to stay. So we'll see what the justice system does with him. But I sympathize with the families completely on that. I wouldn't want to run into that guy on the street if he killed my son in a bus accident or a truck accident. So God only knows what'll come of that. But
So what's the future of all of this?
I'm scared to predict what the future will be because it's trending the wrong direction. Every year, the FMCSA brings in more and more and more of this stuff. Like it started with ELDs, now we're into automatic braking and speed limiters. But in spite of everything they do, the death limit for truck drivers, the death toll for truck drivers goes up every year. So what they're doing obviously isn't working. So that means they need to correct the problem. They need to understand the situation, first of all. And they don't. They're listening to big companies with big dollars. But they ought to quit worrying about lining their pockets and start worrying about actual safety. If it was their family involved in an accident, well, then they'd be listening. But until that happens, they could care less. And it drives me insane.
What happened to the trucker committee? There was a committee with truckers.
The FMCSA set up a driver committee and some experienced people on the committee. It was headed by Todd Spencer, the head of the OIDA, and at the time I thought, thank God, people that understand trucking talking to the FMCSA. You know what? You never hear squat about those guys anymore. And I imagine that's just because the FMCSA has put them in a back boardroom somewhere and closed the door and go, we know what we're doing. We know better than them. It's all about money.
They're just stupid truck drivers.
Yeah, they're just stupid truck drivers. So sad, man. I had some serious hopes for that. Spencer was the right guy to be leading that, but out the window by the look of it.
Got anything else?
Well, I think that's pretty much it. But I'm just frustrated at the stupidity of the people that are supposed to be running this whole system safely, and it's become more and more obvious every year that safety is not their goal.
Z-Bear says it's never enough money for them. True greed and almost demonic, it seems.
Yes, it's true. Yeah, it's greed. And it's amazing they all enter as politicians with $100,000 salaries and all end up multimillionaires. How do you think that happens? They're taking money hand over fist from everybody, all the big corporations.
Did you see the Western driver that took out the pilot fuel island?
No, I didn't see that.
See what?
The Western driver that took out the pilot fuel island, but nothing surprises me anymore. But they've got, the wages are so low, they've got monkeys at the wheel. Like, look at these guys that sleep in the fuel islands, park or go in for dinner or go have a shower, actually bed down in the fuel islands. That's the kind of mentality we're dealing with when you get guys that'll work for minimum wage or less in the trucking industry. That's the mentality that you're dealing with. And all of that has crippled the trucking industry as well. And it will come around to hurt the supply chain. But it hasn't done serious damage yet, so no one's pretending that that's going to happen.
Got anything to say about the freight slowdown?
There is, yes, I'd want to talk about the freight slowdown too, because right now, it's at least the carriers can shed some of their useless drivers. Guys keep running into crap every day. So because the freight is thinning, they need to share the good freight, the freight they've got left among their good drivers. So this slowdown of the freight, it might not actually be a bad thing. The good drivers aren't suffering and they're not looking for work. They're locked in secure with their good carriers, hopefully, and they've been smart enough to go to good carriers, not mega carriers. But they'll survive all this all right. And another beauty of this freight slowdown is the fact that the load brokers are dropping left and right. And there's another group that should be held to account for this safety issue that they've got, because they'll dictate to the truck driver when they want the load there, and they don't care about the hours of service. It's just go, 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 go. So they're another part of the problem. Just like the mega carriers are part of the problem. We should go back to the old days. We never had truck wrecks in the old days. Rarely,
Not
rarely.
many.
About the only time you'd ever see a truck wreck is if it was a team. One guy was in the bunk and the other guy fell asleep at the wheel. That's about the only time you'd ever see that back in the day. Now, truck accidents are like an everyday occurrence. So,
Not today, but your next live. So say you're going to do something about the CB radio involving with
Yeah.
accidents.
I'll
So,
have my next live video that I do. I'll have to talk about the disappearance of the CB radio and how that has impacted truck safety, because there's no question that it has. No question at all, especially in the wintertime. So we'll talk about that in the next live.
anything else?
I think that's it for me. I've cooled off, but
Trucker Hershey said he's laughing at a blind ear.
yeah. I get on a roll, Hirsch, and I just, the brain's going faster than the mouth, which you wouldn't think was possible, but
Oh, Poet says quick as air.
oh man, quick as air. There was a good example. That's a Canadian setup. I could talk for hours.
The purple trucks?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they ran the mail contract, pulling A trains from Toronto and Montreal out to the coast. Single drive axles. Didn't care how they loaded the trailers, which one was heavier, the pup or the lead. They were just told to go, 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 go. Those guys crashed all the time, but they were teams. They were teams.
Why are guys pushing so hard on Highway 5 in Canada?
I'm not sure where Highway 5 is in Canada.
Okay.
I never ran a whole lot of Canada after like the early 80s.
Yeah. One guy says, Bloody Dead says, I just want to get rid of the deaf and the ELDs.
Hey, Bloody Dead, how are you? Yeah, the deaf hasn't really helped the situation. That's another reason a lot of the really good drivers, owner-operators, got out, because there was so much crap with the trucks. The trucks were so damn expensive, and they didn't work nearly as well after they brought in all these emission systems, that a lot of guys just said, you know what, I'm keeping my old girl and bowing out, and that's what I did too. As for the ELDs, we've been preaching at them for years, that drivers have, that, you know, the concept, we understand the concept of holding back on the number of hours a guy can work. We don't agree with the lack of flexibility, like not being able to drive 5 miles to your house when you're out of hours and you're 5 miles from home. And we don't agree with the fact that these big carriers use them like alarm clocks. So if you have to run out of hours at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they use the alarm clock ELD to get you up and going at 2 a.m. regardless of the weather or anything else, whether you feel rested or not. They don't care. They want you going.
Poet says California is trying to get rid of deaf because of the risk of cancer.
Oh, I hadn't heard that, but that's a good idea. Getting rid of deaf because of the risk of cancer.
Will broker transparency ever become a reality?
No, not a
Say
no,
it.
broker transparency. They'll fight that tooth and nail. That'll never become a reality if they can absolutely avoid it, because it's just too easy money the way they've got it now. So they don't want to give that up ever.
Yeah. There's a couple quick questions. Do you think it's a good idea to start a trucking business hauling rock, sand, and gravel? Looking at buying my own truck.
Well, that type of work at least is local, so there's less chance with that type of work that you'll run into trouble from the DOT or load brokers, because there aren't really any in that industry that you need. You just go direct to the customers. You don't need a load broker. So it's probably not a bad niche to be in. You can be home every night or almost every night. That's one of the better niches to go for lately in these days. Long haul's been destroyed. It's ruined.
Okay, and the next time round, he said it would take too long, but Bloody Dead will update you on his show truck.
Yes,
Another day.
I'd like to hear how that show truck is coming.
Okay, so I know.
Good chatting with you. I'm glad you put in the time to listen to my rant. Take care. Keep the rubber side down. If you're going to be safe, you're going to have to do it for yourself, because you can't rely on anyone else to take care of you the way you can take care of you. Drive safely, and we'll see you on the back haul.